From WLWT, this is Issues.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Issues. I'm Courtis Fuller. You know, today we're going to talk about a few issues affecting our community, and one is this violence, this ongoing violence. Recently, as a result of violence, a 9-year-old girl, Alexandria Thompson, was killed. And as we record this show, the person or persons responsible for that incident have not been caught. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. There have been marches taking place, concerned citizens marching to let people know that they want this violence to end. And here with me to talk a little bit more about this is Pastor Ennis Tait from the Church of the Living God. And first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Courtis. I appreciate it.
We were talking before the start of this about this 9-year-old girl. It's hard to believe that we're talking about a 9-year-old girl getting killed in an act of violence like this.
Right.
I think that's what we're all struggling with. Sadly, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. But there is something about this particular incident that just, the brazen act of somebody going into a home and sadly this youngster is killed.
When you think about it, the home is supposed to be the safe place, and so the invasion itself is a violation, but then the heinous crime of taking the life of this beautiful child, it takes it to another level. And it causes a fear in the lives of a lot of people, not just those of us that live in safe communities, but for those that live within the miles or the space where violence is occurring quite often. What next? And we really don't want families to live that way, but it's the reality that we have.
We've talked about this on several occasions, the notion of people rallying behind a cause like this, encouraging people to get involved. So we've seen several marches, not just one, and I think there's going to be ongoing marches. Talk a little bit about what's been taking place.
Part of the responsibility I think that we have, especially with Project Nehemiah Ceasefire and with SERVE and other violence reduction strategies that we have in the city, is to be respondents. So the goal is to be on the scene 24 to 72 hours after the incident. The part of that, the strategy is to make sure that we're there to relieve, to provide comfort for the families and to listen to what's being said. We always know that people that are standing around, some of them have been eyewitnesses or someone was in the loop as to what was going on. So we try to keep our ears to the ground as to what's going on and convey that information to the proper authorities. But the spirit of the march is to really raise awareness, to really bring people together. The solidarity and the unity of our city takes place around incidents. Unfortunately, it's around incidents like this one, but it's designed to bring people together in a spirit, one spirit for our city, and to show the diversity of the city by showing the people that are concerned about the safety of our children and the ones that are against these kinds of activities that are happening in our city.
Some people watching might think, they may be saying to themselves, why aren't people saying something? Is the fear that great that they just don't want to say something? They don't want to turn someone in? Your answer to that would be what?
Unfortunately, that's the case. The fear that arises in the hearts of those who are witnesses or who know information is overwhelming because they don't feel the sense of security. Think about this child. I mean, my home is the safest place. If I'm afraid to live in my own home, then there's nothing that I'm going to do to further alienate myself from my safety. In other words, we have people who still don't trust the police, which are supposed to be our safe keepers. Then we have people who don't trust their neighbors, and we have people who don't trust family members. So the lack of trust has caused the fear to supersede my responsibility to say something, and to, when I see something, to say something. That's what I want to do.
What do you say to congregations? What are you saying to your church members as we go through this violence and deal with this? And there's been so much. I mean, I've said on many occasions, 2016 was a rough year. I mean, yes. From a news standpoint, we covered all types of things. I mean, it started out with shootings in schools and So what do you say to church members who are trying to cope with this climate, and I'll say a climate of fear, we see a climate of hate? What are you saying to them?
To try to keep the message as simple as possible. One thing that you'll always hear me say is this is a reality. We always have to remind people that God is in control and that anything that happens, no matter what your faith, God is involved. But as it relates to the Christian faith, we try to give people that hope that beyond this situation and beyond the realities of what we see on a day-to-day basis, that there's still a brighter day coming, and we need to look toward that brighter day. We need to work toward that brighter day and to do our part. We can't just sit by and let things happen and not say something or not get involved. I think it's the church's role and responsibility to be out front and to be engaged in all kinds of activities, good and when you have to deal with situations like this, so that the people know that there's still hope. And the voice of God speaks through the church. And so if the church is really going to help people, we have to be out in front and be engaged in what people are dealing with on a daily basis.
And I think, and I see you connected with various organizations. I mean, this is a multi-pronged approach to finding some solution to what we're seeing in the community. I mean, education, healthcare, all of these issues impact what has now become the bottom line, and that's that violence and the hate that we're seeing.
Yeah, one of the things that I think we've not done that what's happening in Chicago is that we see violence as a health issue. And so when you factor in mental illness and you factor in the pressure and the trauma that people are experiencing because of poverty, because of root causes that happen within the family. Violence is an expression, but it's the expression of something that is occurring on the inside. And there are psychological things that we've just not addressed that people are dealing with that lead to these issues. The anger that we see didn't just happen yesterday. That's been building up for some time, and we need to be able to assess our students, assess our children, assess parents as to where they are, and then be able to offer them some type of support so that they can kind of work through these challenges before we get to this part.
All right, let's take a break, and then when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about this notion of guns. You and I have had some discussions about how the guns get here and who brings them in and things of that nature. So we'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Courtis Fuller here with Pastor Ennis Tait, Church of the Living God, and we've been talking about things happening in the community. He's been real instrumental in some of the marches you've been seeing, primarily, most recently, tied to the death of a 9-year-old Alexandria Thompson, who was shot and killed inside her home. Her father was also shot. He is recovering. A lot of questions still surround that whole case. Investigation is taking place. But as we record this on this day, no one has been caught tied to that. Guns. We've talked a lot about how these guns get here, who brings them in. But I remember you saying to me, this might have been a couple of years ago, that there are guns getting in the hands of, ironically, 9-year-olds. Yes. Easier than they should. Is that still happening? Talk a little bit about your thoughts about that and what you know to.
In a lot of conversations, we've kind of uncovered that guns are coming in a couple of ways. When you talk about getting into the hands of the children, one is the community gun that we've learned about, where there's a gun that is out there on the streets, not really sure how it got there, but it's hidden in one spot, and everybody that is connected to it knows where it is, and they use that gun as they see fit. That's the community gun, and kids find out just as they look for different things that may be hiding, they may stumble upon it. We've seen guns thrown into the woods, and kids are just playing and they stumble upon it. That's one way. The other way is there are a lot of parents who have guns in their homes, and children are actually stealing the guns and learning how to use them and becoming empowered by the access to the gun. And then the thought of being able to carry the gun. So we find that the trouble is parents have yet to justify why they need a gun other than their safety. Whether it's a concealed weapon or not, any access to a gun for a child is an exploratory adventure. And they're going to see different things in video games that empowered by violence. So they're going to be drawn to those things. If I'm living in a community where violence is definitely prevalent, I'm going to be drawn to that gun because it empowers me to connect with the men that I idolize. And I want to be seen by them as a worthy brother or sister. And those are the things we have to deal with.
And there's no way to, if most people know these community guns, I hadn't heard that term, and so that's interesting. But these community guns, if a lot of people know that they exist, why is there a way of police getting a hold of these? I assume that there are a lot of them out there.
Locations are secret, and it's an underground code that people use, and that location changes. And so depending on who uses the gun and where they use it, it may end up on a different side of the community or a different location of the city. And then the communication is basically underground. A lot of times we stumble upon them, but that gun exists, and sometimes for a long period of time because of how they operate underground. And we may or may not know, and when we find out, we try to secure them or we try to confiscate them. But just as we confiscate one, another one is right in place. And the cycle keeps going.
And I would imagine you found out a lot of this when you were doing the buybacks.
That's correct. That's correct. People were just bringing information, along with the guns, bringing information. It's good to also have the engagement with the young people. I mean, they give you a lot of information. You got to love children. They know more than their parents sometimes when it comes to issues like this, because a lot of kids are talking to each other in schools and other sites and different relationships. Unfortunately, they keep that information to themselves because there is a street code and there's a code of silence that they abide by. And unfortunately, it causes more problems for us in trying to really deal with this issue.
That street code is survival. And I know that we tell people all the time, if you see something, say something. But that element of survival is a real, as you said earlier, I mean, the fear is real. That survival issue is very real too. I know that the police department has developed a witness protection program. But the complexities of that to a 17-year-old or to a 40-year-old, easier said than done. I mean, you know, and picking up and moving and all of that, it's sometimes easier for them to say to themselves, I'll just stay quiet.
That's right.
But our message has to be consistent. You have to make the sacrifice. You have to. There's no...
It's hard to convince families that what they've seen is their willingness to speak is safer or better than them moving away. Because at the end of the day, a lack of trust. You don't know how people perceive you. You don't want to move to a new location where you got to start life all over again because of one incident. So it is easier for me to stay quiet and keep it to myself. But ultimately, we've learned psychologically that it begins to create a traumatic experience. And that traumatic experience is lived out in different ways. It may spark violence in the home because of the frustration of keeping that information. It may cause kids to run away or become more violent in their own way. So we have to be very careful, again, how we assess these situations. The root cause inside the home is the starting place for how we deal with violence. All violence, not just gun violence, but gun violence is truly an issue, but violence is the overarching concern.
Police looking at 2016 numbers in terms of crime stats, how would you assess how we're doing overall in the city? Not necessarily statistically, but are we getting at the problem the way we should? I know that you have the buyback and you have the ongoing efforts to tap into the community. You know, we have options out there like the youth curfews, if we thought that was needed. Just how do you think we're doing as a city?
One of the things that I think is very important is that we stay true to the collaborative agreement. It is the strongest bond that we have to make sure that we're all being held accountable for what we're doing. The champions that are important to that cause are the community leaders like Iris Rowley and Pastor Damon Lynch III, Nelson Pierce, but also the legal people that are associated with that and connected, as well as the judicial people. But the police are the most important part. And I think Chief Isaac has done a great job of trying to keep that as his focus. I know that there's some challenges internally, but how we police and the spirit of community police relations and not police community relations is going to be the reason why we see the shift in the stats and the spirit in Cincinnati. It's communities like Westwood and Price Hill who are really taking this and taking ownership of it. Avondale, Western Hills, Walnut Hills, Bond Hill. There are community leaders stepping up and saying, we have to do something about this. Police are there to support, but having that community engagement is the greatest solution to helping to eradicate the issues that each community deals with.
I'll take another break and let you catch your breath. I appreciate you. I've always told you that I appreciate hearing your thoughts relative to the community. We've had these incidents of hate, vandalism. We've seen it over at Hebrew Union College, also just recently at Withrow. So I want to talk about that and how that factors into what we're seeing in terms of the violence as well. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. We're having a very interesting conversation today. You know, we've had so much going on throughout greater Cincinnati, really throughout the country over the past 12, 18 months. But particularly here in Cincinnati, you know, we've had some violence issues, and then we've had most recently a couple of incidents of pretty disturbing incidents of hate. Vandalism at Withrow, vandalism at Hebrew Union College. What sparks that? I mean, where does that come from all of a sudden? I know we've been in a strange cycle for the past 18 months, but why now here in Cincinnati are we seeing this? Any idea?
And I'll be very, very careful how I respond, but the truth is it's a spirit that was awakened. The campaign that we saw in this country was more than just about changing the way business happens in Washington. It was an awakening of a spirit that has been dormant for a long time. We're seeing evidence of the kinds of behavior that we saw in the 60s and the 70s. And it's truly hate for race and hate for religion. And it's the spirit that we have worked to try to subdue through policy and through making the right decisions about how we engage with one another and respecting culture. But because of that spirit that we see now operating in our city, it was a deliberate and intentional for me to see it become stronger in Cincinnati because of who Ohio is. And you're starting to see now a breaking out of something that controls people who really have felt this way for a long time.
Mm-hmm. You know, all things work for good.
Yes, sir.
You know that better than I. And this may sound strange, but maybe this awakening is a good thing, because I was reading King's last speech, been to the mountaintop speech. And I was reminded of how that could have been written yesterday, how it sounds, even though we are now almost 50 years removed from that, April of 68. It sounds so much the same. So maybe we've just swept things under the rug for 50 years, being polite, thinking that we were changing. And so now, maybe it's time for the country to go through, the city, families, communities, to really go through a cleansing to reach the level of love that King talked about, and even the Bible teaches.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. We swept it under the rug, but the danger that we saw was the overcoming that Martin Luther King talked about was not something that African Americans created or experienced. It was legislated for us. It was legalized, and as a result, those privileges are now being challenged. And that's what awakens the spirit that we're talking about, because we're still not being seen as Americans. We're still being considered outsiders, as if we arrived, of our own will. But Martin Luther King opened a way for the spirit to arise. We subdued it with fear through fear, and we didn't know how to transition from Martin Luther King to the next level. We looked for a leader, and we couldn't find it in one person. So we found it in an abundance of people. But I think it was infiltrated by legalism. It was infiltrated by people in government, and they used that strategy to really put us in a box. And now the box is broken, and now they want to control us from a different perspective.
One thing that King talked about in '68 is the poverty, and I know we have a couple seconds left, and it's a hard subject to take on in less than a minute, but that whole poverty piece. Fortunately, we have some great organizations working to address that in a big way, and you and I have attended the summits, and I know you've been a big part of that. But that is at the core of this.
You're correct.
Yeah.
And the same thing, that's why I said it was the spirit then, and it's the same thing now. So poverty is the critical point of our transformation. If we deal with it the right way, we'll start to see a new light in our country.
If people want to get involved, and going back to our initial point, if people want to get involved with the marches or just get involved with some of the efforts, they can contact you.
They can contact me at 513-569-5664. Like us on Facebook as Ceasefire, or follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, isn't that something? Give the number one more time.
513-569-5664.
All right, thank you. It's always good to see you.
I
appreciate that.
Thank you.
We're going to take a final break, and then I'll be back to wrap things up. Before we wrap things up, I want to give you that telephone number one more time. It's to Project Nehemiah, 513-569-5664. We have a lot of work that we still have to do. I'm Courtis Fuller. Have a nice day.